Mortal Kombat Annihilation is a movie that, from what I can tell, no one wanted to make, and yet they did anyway. As a kid, I liked it well enough because it's hard to gauge quality when you're like 3 years old, but after something like 14 years since the last time I saw it, I decided to give it a watch again to see how it holds up after all this time.
And it is glorious!
It was not glorious. I'm gonna need a smoke before diving into this conversation. And I don't mean nicotine. Smoke.
Hey, smoking's bad for you, kids.
Oh, look at me, I'm Slither Boy, and I have a cool background graphic that people want to make fan art of. I have a neat and memorable costume. What was I talking about? Oh right, Natalie Portman fights a talking bear. I've seen a lot of people list this one as another severed limb in the mass grave of a genre we call video game movies, but I feel like there's not enough talk about why it's bad. Most folks like to poke fun at the surface level things, like the goofy costumes and awful acting, but I think there's more layers to its failings than just that. I think this movie is special in how much of a failure it turned out to be. Especially coming hot off the trail of the first MK movie, which a lot of people have some reverence for despite its flaws. We live in the age of sequels and franchises and reboots and trying again and again until an idea works when it comes to movies. If a big tentpole superhero movie fails to live up to expectations, they just recast and reboot right away, and before 3 years have passed, we have a whole new version of it. But Annihilation didn't get that treatment. As established in my previous video, Mortal Kombat was a pretty huge brand at the time, but then it just fizzled out and stopped one day. And while you can certainly blame it on the lackluster products and adaptations coming out en masse, a fair amount of those had redeemable qualities. I think the reason Mortal Kombat faded out from the media conscious once and for all was because of this. Mortal Kombat Annihilation killed an entire franchise. Sure, Batman and Robin is legendary for how poorly it turned out, but that didn't stop them from rebooting Batman less than a decade later. Franchises revive rather quickly, but a new Mortal Kombat movie is only now picking up traction again in 2019. There was something so wrong with this movie that no studio wanted to touch the brand for 22 years. The whole shebang starts literally the same scene where the last one left off with, but some things are immediately off. For one, Shao Kahn's voice and appearance are different because they actually cast an actor instead of just putting whatever they had lying around up on the sky. This opening recap shows us what happened in the first movie, but you may notice it only shows clips of Liu Kang doing anything, because he's one of the only 2 actors who came back. Johnny, Raiden, Sonya, and even Jax are all recast. My theory behind this is because the original cast knew this was from a first-time director, which often doesn't bode well for a big movie like this. And then they read the script, because oh boy, this script. Annihilation is based on Mortal Kombat 3, since the first movie was a mashup of 1 and 2 in an odd way, including them going to Outworld and Sonya being prisoner and all that jazz. So, much like the games, Shao Kahn discovers a loophole that'll let him take over Earth if his ex-wife prisoner is still alive. He uses some dark magic to bring her back with her weird Medusa hair and sonic screaming powers that she only uses once for some reason. Then they start invading Earth. Johnny Cage is killed off in the first 7 minutes of the film and everyone gets their ass kicked. Really, they couldn't get the original actor back for even one scene? Like he'd have been on set for 1 day. Come on. I guess narratively, this opening scene it's doing okay. Like, it could be worse. But then there's all these cool character designs that have been mangled, this poor casting for every villain, awful dialogue.
It's not a fight we can win here. Annihilate them!
What the hell is happening to the sky? I can see every seam in the texture they put in the background. Why does it take so long to flip there? God! They're still going. Okay, they made it. This movie opens on a shaky note and never really recovers. I think rather than doing that boring format of breaking down every scene with jokes and then summarizing it all with a single closing paragraph of criticism, I'll, do the other played-out format for reviews. Originality is dead and this movie killed it.
Choose your destiny.
Robin Shou is a decent Liu Kang. They never give him much to work with in terms of writing, but I still think he's doing his best. His fight scenes are serviceable because he has a background in martial arts and knows what he's doing. He's the only one I like when it comes to the casting. Everyone else feels stiff or weird. Like, all these other actors seem like they aren't 100% sure what movie they're in and bring a completely different energy to it that contrasts in an ugly way when they're in scenes together. The guy playing Jack seems to think he's in a tongue-in-cheek action comedy, while Sonya feels right out of a Michael Bay movie where she's taking everything too seriously, despite how stupid it all is. This makes them both have a really unfitting on-screen chemistry. The guy they got for Raiden never at any point looks comfortable or natural in the costumes they have him wear, so he's just visually out of place. He doesn't have that same charisma and mysteriousness that Christopher Lambert brought to the role. Like, Vilgax over here is clearly trying to take this seriously, but he never quite grasps the same sarcastic mentor vibe. He seems really helpless and unsure from the very start of the movie, and it's hard to imagine this as the same character from the previous one because of it. I guess Raiden's only at his best when he's someone from the Highlander. They do have Harry Morgan over here doing some fight scenes as Raiden to make up for the lack of them in the first movie, and it's, boy, those bricks sure do seem light. This fight he has with Reptile is narratively and visually ripped right from the first movie, the only difference being now that there's 2 of them. If they made a 3rd movie, would they just stop and fight 3 reptiles at some point? Rendered in glorious PS1 FMV. What are they kicking? Stop! Shao Kahn is, not what you'd hope for. He's not this imposing, frightening figure. He's too small to really have that same visual presence from the games, and they can't just digitally size him up like in the games either. His costume is so silly and clunky that they have him wear it as little as possible. His voice sounds more whiny than intimidating.
Your world becomes my world. Why not, Lord Raiden? You hid behind him your entire pathetic life.
And trust me, I am an expert on having a whiny voice. And they made no attempt to make him seem otherworldly or mystical. He's not a big scary monster from another universe, he's just some fucking dude bro. He looks more like he'd be at home in a Fast and Furious movie. Everyone else feels right out of the cast of a Power Rangers show. Just gnashing that scenery in their frothing maws like a ravenous pack of wolves.
You're alive. Too bad you will die.
Yes!
Speaking of dude bros, they made the wise and worldly Nightwolf into a jealous jock that bird dogs Liu Kang in some strange attempt to prepare him for more battles.
So you're Raiden's prodigy. I've seen better.
Then sends him on a spirit journey to come to some great epiphany. Usually this would entail drinking some kind of Native American tea or smoking some strange herb, but this movie has to make its cliches as blunt as possible.
You've got to put yourself in a dream state.
Instead, he sends Liu Kang on his vision quest by bashing him in his head with the casual end of a tomahawk. This is who they cast as Jade. Okay.
Fight!
This movie is chock full of fights that have no real purpose and don't advance the plot. In the first movie, it felt like they mattered because they established every bad guy at the beginning and why it was important that they were all beaten. Then we worked our way up to it. Sonya had a personal stake in beating Kano to avenge her partner. Johnny wanted to prove himself in a real fight, and battling someone like Scorpion is as real as it gets. Liu taking on Sub-Zero helped to really establish his trust for Katana. Johnny took on Goro because he felt like he was the most disposable hero and he didn't believe he could do it, which made it all the more satisfying when he did. And finally, Shang Tsung was a personal battle for Liu Kang in avenging his brother and letting go of his perceived failures. The reptile fight was bullshit though, I got nothing for that. This guy hit that feature-length running time. In Annihilation, every fight is just bad guy shows up, hero beats them, they talk about it for a little bit, next scene. Smoke and Cyrax are 2 really cool, tragic characters with a lot of emotional connection to Sub-Zero, but both of them just walk up, fight our heroes, get their asses kicked, and then nothing else more is said about them. Even the cartoon acknowledged that these 2 used to be best buds. What a waste of such a handsome character. Sub-Zero establishes that he wants to be an ally to Katana and Kang, so he creates a bridge for them to help them along their journey. Then Scorpion randomly jumps in, they fight, and then they both fuck off for the entire rest of the movie and are never mentioned again. Cyrax shows up and loses. Reptile shows up and loses. Melina shows up. She's Katana's clone and Shao Kahn's weird surrogate daughter. See, the 3 of them have like a Thanos Gamora Nebula thing going on. There's a lot you can do with that family drama dynamic. Khan finds Kitana to be a disappointment and creates this evil version of her that he posits will be superior. There's some sibling rivalry as Kitana beats her mirror version. Melina is loyal to Khan despite being cursed with an appearance she's ashamed of. Lots of stuff you can make movie about. But no, she just shows up with no introduction and mud wrestles with Sonya because this movie has no class. Then she gets kicked in the face so hard she dies, I guess? Everything is just a bunch of filler devoid of substance, and this movie is already barely a feature length. The fights themselves are weird and weightless wire fighting where gravity is a non-issue. The performers are doing as many flips and kicks as possible without any of it actually connecting, so it's more like a bunch of interpretive dance routines. There's a lot of use of slow motion to disguise the fact that very few of these people know how to fight, and I wish they could just stop flipping. There's so many flips! Then it gets really confusing when Khan kills Rain to do that one trope, but then Rain shows up again later to fight Jax.
Where's Rain, huh? Where's Rain at? Let's go, Rain! Where you at, baby? Where's the other people, huh? Where the hell is Rain?
You suck.
The story is a long list of ideas introduced with no meaning or purpose. It's just hollow decisions made to add to the running time. Hell, a lot of stuff happens just so it can have no point a few minutes later, begging the question why it was there at all other than to just make the movie longer. Let's list all of them, shall we? Why did Sub-Zero make a bridge if they could just jump across? Why did Nightwolf send Liu Kang on a spirit journey if the only realization he'd come to is he's not confident in his ability to beat Shao Kahn? Even though we already knew that. No one learned anything. Why did Jade team up with the good guys, contribute nothing, immediately teleport away after coming out as a traitor, and then get killed off? She basically added nothing to the movie except a scene full of sexual tension where she straddles Liu Kang in the snow while wearing a revealing outfit that would be super cold. Why did the movie establish this weird robot-style hamster ball through underground tubes if everyone would just stop using them instantly? It basically added nothing to the movie except a scene full of sexual tension where Kitana is pressing her body against Liu Kang when they could have easily just faced away from each other. wait, I guess Sonya and Raiden had to do the same thing off screen? Why didn't they show us that? Why is Shinnok even here? They kind of hurt their ability to make sequels by introducing him so early and in such a limiting role. Now he's not only a fallen elder god, but he's also Raiden and Shao Kahn's dad. And those two are brothers. I feel like a lot of bad adaptations try to simplify a big cast of characters by just making them all related or know each other before anything important happens, so they don't need to build any connections or relationships in the movie. As far as I can tell, the only real reason they added this element of familial ties was so that Raiden would have reason to not brutally fucking kill Shao Kahn as soon as he stepped onto Earth. But he still tries to fight him anyway, and he doesn't even acknowledge or act like Kahn is his brother until the final fight. I guess he let him throw him into those bricks there because he loved his brother too much to beat his ass. What are you doing? What was that? Sindel has a sonic scream that can blow up an entire building in a few seconds. She then screams at the entire side of this canyon and blows up the cave where they find the Matrix of Leadership, but like, she blows it up really slowly? For some reason it's on a time delay and it takes like 45 seconds for the sound to carry and kill all the heroes at once. Then they say it was a trap to lure the heroes into a portal to Outworld so they could beat them later, but like, why not just kill them now? And it's not because Jade is a double agent. They show us she's pretty expendable later on. What are you doing? What is anyone doing? Why do you only have 2 of them out of 3? You can just paint the suit red after you're done with it. There's a major plot point where Nightwolf shows Liu Kang that if you have enough willpower, you can transform into an animal, I guess. Why of all the finishers in the game, this was the one they decided to write into the script, I'll never know. But then later, Liu discovers his animality is to turn into a dragon. But Shao Kahn is also well versed in the art of transforming into a rejected Beast Wars design, and uses all 3 cards to activate his final form, King Ghidorah, the effeminately screeching dragon. But then after all that, they just stop being dragons and Lou beats him in hand-to-hand. This movie feels like it was written by a small child that played the games and had the characters and story badly explained to him by his older brother that was kinda high while reading all the bios at the arcade. And then the emotional core of the film. Raiden's path to sacrificing his immortality because he believes it would be better to die as a human than to live as a god in a world without freedom. But then the other gods just bring him back instantly because happy endings.
Finish him.
From top to bottom, every single aspect of this movie is incompetent in the strangest ways when a lot of it seemed pretty avoidable. There's plenty of ideas that could have been utilized and structured in an interesting way if they hadn't just run with the first draft. I truly believe there was a way to make a halfway decent movie out of this because, well, the first one was halfway decent. Like I said, that one kinda knew what it was doing in a handful of ways. I still stand by my conclusion that it's very flawed but still enjoyable and did some things right. Yet somehow every stupid chuckle fuck in the comments decided this was a controversial take before repeating it back to me word for word. So I'm wrong for saying it's a flawed but still enjoyable movie, because in reality, it's a flawed but still enjoyable movie. It's like you didn't even watch it, your opinions are terrible. How dare you say the same thing I will now explain to you for the rest of my comment. I see why most YouTubers are so jaded now. You people can be exhausting. Anyway, Annihilation just can't seem to get anything right. The character arcs are basic and by the numbers. The effects wouldn't have held up if this movie was released in the 80s. And it's so hollow and devoid of life. It's just a bunch of things happening with no rhyme or reason, and it's very loosely structured into a story. When people talk about video game movies being incompetent cash grabs, they're talking about something like this. A movie so bad it made a franchise into poison for 2 decades. Even if the reboot isn't great, it can't sink any lower than this. And hey, they got some great people cast for it. And you can almost guarantee the effects will be on point. It's hard to make a bad-looking movie these days. Not for lack of trying! Even though Mortal Kombat receded into obscurity and ridicule as a movie or TV property after this, there was still hope, though. The games haven't missed a beat, and they went strong from back then all the way until this year and beyond. So for the next round, let's get back into appreciating Mortal Kombat in the medium it was meant for. The land of Technicolor blood textures and polygonal bodies being torn asunder. Next time, Sal Solo and Billy Mitchell join forces to become the Deadly Alliance.